Have you ever found yourself wondering, what should I actually be praying for? Not just when you're in a jam, but all the time. It's a huge question, right? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into the Apostle Paul's letter to the Colossians because it turns out there's a powerful and maybe even surprising blueprint for prayer hidden right there. So let's just jump right in with the big question. What is prayer really for? Is it just some kind of cosmic vending machine where we put in requests and hope for the best? The source material we're looking at today suggests it's something way, way deeper than that. To really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down. We'll kick things off with a foundation, Thanksgiving. Then we'll get into 5 core prayers straight from Colossians. After that, we'll talk about who to pray for, tackle a really complex idea about sin, and finally wrap it all up with the ultimate goal of prayer. So where does this powerful model for prayer even begin? Well, you might be surprised. It's not with a laundry list of our needs or our problems. Nope. The very first step, the starting point that Paul gives the church in Colossae, is simply gratitude. And check out the focus here. Before asking for a single thing, the example is to thank God for what he's already doing, specifically being thankful for the faith of other people and for the grace of God that makes it all possible. This completely reframes everything. It sets up a prayer life that's rooted not in what we want, but in what God is doing. The big takeaway? Prayer starts by looking outward at God's work, not inward at our own wish list. Okay, so with that foundation of gratitude in place, let's get to the real meat of this teaching. The sermon pulls out a super clear 5-point blueprint right from Paul's own words. It gives us a really practical guide for what we should be focusing on. And this is the verse that kicks it all off. Paul literally says he has not stopped praying. I mean, think about that. What could possibly be so important that he would pray for it constantly? Well, it wasn't for their health or their finances. It was for something way more significant. And here they are, the 5 core requests. Right after giving thanks, Paul prays for them to know God's will, to get real spiritual wisdom and understanding, for their salvation and the salvation of others, and finally, to grow in a deep love that comes from the Spirit. This is the whole shebang. And the big shift here, the game changer, is moving from praying about our circumstances to praying for our spiritual character. All right, so now we've got a model for what to pray. But the sermon then widens the lens to ask an equally important question. Who are we supposed to be praying for? And let me tell you, the answer is huge. And honestly, it's pretty challenging. Yeah, the scope here is massive. The source material is clear. Prayer is for everyone, no exceptions. That means our leaders and people in authority, so we can all live in peace. It means our fellow believers, to build them up. And then there's this one. It even includes people who are actively persecuting you. It's a radical call to a kind of selfless prayer that reaches way beyond our own little circle. Okay, deep breath. We're now getting to the most theologically chewy part of this whole explainer. The sermon dives into a really difficult passage that seems to put a limit on our prayers, specifically when it comes to a certain kind of sin. This verse from 1 John is where this whole complex idea comes from, a sin that leads to death, that we're told not to pray for. So what on earth does that actually mean? It's really, really important that we get how the sermon defines this. So here's the crucial point. The sermon interprets this not as some single awful act, but as a settled, continuous state of being. It's when a person knowingly and consciously just abandons God, turns to worship other things, and lives in a state of rebellion where they absolutely refuse to repent. They're not looking for forgiveness. They're actively rejecting the source of forgiveness. And the source material draws a really clear line in the sand. We absolutely should pray for a fellow believer who messes up and wants to come back, like when Peter told Simon the sorcerer to repent so he could be forgiven. But, the sermon argues, we're not supposed to pray for someone like King Saul, who God had already rejected because of his persistent, unrepentant rebellion. The point is, prayer isn't a tool we can use to force God's hand for someone who has no desire to be forgiven. And all of this, what to pray, who to pray for, and even when not to pray, it all leads us to the final and, frankly, the most important point of all. What is the ultimate goal here? Because it's definitely not about just changing our day-to-day situations. This verse right here, this is the key that unlocks everything. The entire sermon really hinges on this one idea. God's deepest desire is for everyone to be saved and to get it, to understand the truth. So it makes sense that the highest purpose of our prayers would be to get on board with his desire. So the huge takeaway, the aha moment, is this major shift in perspective. Prayer becomes less about asking God to fix our personal problems and way more about asking Him to help us and to help others to know His will, to grasp His truth, and to be a part of His grand plan of salvation. It's all about spiritual transformation. And that leaves us with one final, really powerful question to think about. Based on everything we've seen in this Colossians model, is the main point of prayer to try and change God's mind, or is it the tool God uses to change ours? It's definitely something worth chewing on.